Before the story begins, I would like to encourage you to like and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy scary stories and creepypastas. I write a new story once a week and narrate it, so any support from you guys would be tremendously appreciated. Okay, guys, now on to the story. Cue the clock. Room for more. Have you ever stared at a piece of meat with the same enchantment that one might have for a loved one? Have you ever savored the scent of a freshly well-prepared meal? These questions cause my skin to literally curl with the beloved anticipation of eating. Because I love food. And honestly, I think it loves me back. Let me explain. I am a professional competitive eater. You must be wondering to yourself, what in the world is that? Well, I get paid to compete against other aggressive eaters. It's a battle in reality. Me indulging into the world of combat with every bite I consume. My weapon of choice, a fork. I know it sounds a bit funny, and perhaps to most this might even sound like a joke, but for me it's life. I get paid handsomely for every competition I win, along with the perk of devouring all that delicious food. Sometimes it's a hot dog eating contest. Other times it's pie. There's even been exotic foods like camel. My wife tells me that I need to slow down, that I need to take a break from my sport. She wants me to hang around long enough to see my newborn grow. But I can't. I just love food way too much. Well, that was until I found a website called Room for More. I received the strangest invitation in the mail. It was to another eating contest, one like no other. The details were secretive and elusive. It didn't reveal what meal or type of food I would be consuming. Rather, it detailed their delight at having a champion as myself competing against other world elite eaters. The idea of being in a global eating contest caused the hairs on the back of my neck to stand. But more vividly, it caused my stomach to grumble. I read thoroughly through the invitation looking for any clues to what organization this was. It just stated that they knew who I was and that the grand prize would be 100 grand. I can't believe it. I ecstatically said out loud to myself, causing my wife to yell out "what" from the room over. I ignored her, not bothering to respond. Instead, I kept reading every word presented to me in the unusual letter. We are glad to have a champion of your caliber, but know that the food of choice would be kept a secret until the tournament. Once revealed, refusal of eating said food would result in immediate disqualification. The invite stated. I laughed, knowing that their tactic of intimidation would not scare me. Rather, it excited me. I have eaten all types of meats before, and truth be told, I even tasted the most vile of creatures. You wouldn't want to know. Just know the show Fear Factor wouldn't have dissuaded me one bit. I was elated at the prospect of winning that amount of money. After all, it would come in handy with my new baby girl. But I was more beguiled with the idea of consuming some mystery meat that supposedly would cause most to shudder away. I could feel my mouth become inundated with drool, and that grumbling in my stomach intensified. I was hungry. All this talk about eating and winning had me practically giggling from thrill. I headed towards my refrigerator, ready to discover a well-needed midnight snack. As I opened the door, I was showered in the fridge's warm light, it feeling as if I was descending into heaven. And as my eyes soared across the shelves of food we kept, my gaze narrowed in on a strawberry glazed cheesecake. I could feel the sides of my face stretch wide, resulting in me revealing a euphoric smile. I pulled the cheesecake out and inhaled its essence deeply, as if I could taste it without even taking a bite. And with no fork, I stuffed my entire face into the pie. I started to devour bite by bite, and as my face pulled away from the now empty container, I looked up to the heavens with wonderment. I almost wept from happiness. That's when I felt it. Sudden sharp pains shot through my left arm. No. No! I yelped out, understanding what was happening. I grabbed at my chest and squeezed tightly as I fell to the floor with a heavy thud. I could hear my wife running towards me, screaming as my baby girl cried profusely. I was having a heart attack. And the last thing I remember was my wife's angelic face staring down at me, asking me to stay with her a bit longer. And then, nothing. Pure darkness. I woke up in the hospital, with tubes protruding from my arm, while machines made all sorts of beeps and chimes. In reality, I was frightened. But I didn't struggle to move. I was too tired, as if I haven't slept in years. And with me now being coherent, I realized my wife was in the room with me. Before I could say a word, I noticed she was already staring at me and ran towards me, embracing me in her warmth. The doc said I was lucky, that they were able to perform surgery on me in the nick of time, that my ticker had a few more years left. I was delighted knowing that I would have more time with my family. But more importantly, I was more jovial at the idea that I had more time for food. That's when my world tilted upside down. To my horror, the doc told me that they had to also perform some gastric procedure. Wait, you sewed my stomach shut? I angrily asked the doctor. The doc told me there was no other choice, and that my wife, as caregiver, permitted the procedure. They told me that I had been in a coma for 2 weeks, that I haven't eaten in 2 weeks. I grabbed at my stomach. It felt smaller. No, not smaller, but emptier. But worse, I wasn't even hungry. I cried to myself that whole night and gave my wife the silent treatment. I know she loves me and just wanted to save my life, but what about my food? It loves me too. As the weeks passed, I grew into a bit of a depression. I felt nihilistic, which most would consider odd, since I recently escaped the clutches of death. But at what cost? I was no longer able to indulge in my sport. Actually, to be more specific, I was no longer able to desire what I cherished most. Each day my wife would caress my shoulders and tell me that she loved me, usually putting my daughter into my lap. I did my best to pretend I was okay, but deep down, I was a shell of my former self. Passion now eluded me. Then, as if a dagger itself was flung into my heart, I received that same mysterious invitation I had gotten over a month ago. I stared at the letter with a bit of bewilderment. I had assumed the competition would have been over. As I read through the invitation, its ambiguous details were still evident. But the only thing that was made clear was they still wanted me to enter.
Mr. Pulver, we haven't heard from you. We are very disappointed. We know of your reputation, and this competition wouldn't be the same without a champion such as yourself. Please reconsider entering. After all, you wouldn't want to miss out on the mystery meat.
The letter read. My face froze from utter dread, knowing that I couldn't even self-indulge for my own pleasure, let alone enter a tournament. Though in the moment I felt inspired, and with very little effort my body took hold of itself as I stormed towards the fridge. I was determined to get past my limitations and return to my former glorious self. I opened the refrigerator and scoured over the food that was available. Most were healthy foods, mainly veggies and yogurt, but in the far back, my sight fixated on what seemed to be a slice of cake.
Now, how did that get there?
I pondered to myself. I reached my now thin arm through the blockade of health and retrieved my enchanting dessert. I stared at the cake with adulation as I cradled it cautiously in my hand. I then opened my mouth wide and took a bite. The sweetness engulfing my taste buds. I felt my eyes become dilated while my blood rushed to my head. I almost felt faint, but I stood my ground and I smiled. I'm back, baby, I told myself with such a blissful glee. I went for another bite, but that's when I felt the tremble in my stomach, as if my skin was expanding and it was stretching from inside out. I knew that feeling. I was already full. No! I said to my dismay. I felt my eyes begin to water in disappointment, and I put down the delicious pastry. I knew it was time to fix the atrocity that had been bestowed upon me. I stormed with heavy haste towards my computer. I then journeyed through the internet for answers and advice of how to regain my appetite, how to fight through the anguish. I must have searched for hours because by the time I finally gave up, I realized it was already midnight. I went to turn off my computer, but then I saw a response in the forum I was reading.
Not your old self? Just want to be you again? Return to your glorious days and more. Visit us at roomformore.com.
My jaw dropped with astonishment. This surely felt like the answer I was searching for. I clicked the link and I was redirected to a website that bared the same name they advertised. The site was simple, not very impressive. Just the same words I read mere seconds ago on the forum was on their main page.
Odd.
I whimpered underneath my breath, feeling a bit befuddled. I saw a drop-down menu that was titled Products, so I clicked with curiosity, wanting to know what services they did offer. And to my surprise, they sold supplements. Actually, more like supplement. They only sold one pill. The purple pill, they called it. But it was guaranteed to restore my appetite, to make me complete again. Though the whole sight seemed strange, I was desperate, and I was willing to do anything to return to my love. So I purchased the strange pill. Days came and went as I grew more anxious, waiting on my miracle cure. My wife could sense my uneasiness. She constantly would ask if I was okay, which always caused me to roll my eyes. After almost a week, my miraculous drug had finally arrived in a discreet, obscure brown package. My wife even saw it and asked if I ordered something dirty by mail while giggling.
You know me,
I said with a slight chuckle, grabbing the box away from her. I raced to the bathroom and tore open the package. To my shock stood only one pill. It wasn't a jar of pills, but just one. A very odd-looking one. It almost looked black, but glistened purple in the light. I hesitated for a moment, not knowing if I was making a mistake. And before I could fully digest the situation for its anomalous nature, the pill was already down my throat. I can't explain it, but within minutes I felt almost as if I was being reborn. Not being brought back to life, rather more as if I was shedding old skin. I couldn't tell you how I knew, but I was healed. I was back. And more importantly, I was hungry. I waited for my wife to fall asleep, doing my best to hold in my appetite. I could feel bits of drool squirming down my chin in anticipation. I waited and waited, and finally my wife had fallen asleep. I passionately flung myself into the kitchen, reaching my hand for the first item I could grab from the refrigerator. And without even looking, I started to devour. I did this over and over for at least an hour until the fridge was completely empty. I didn't know what I would tell my wife in the morning. I figured I'll make something up, but for the moment I was still hungry. So I headed out into the streets, driving towards any fast food joint still open. By the end of the night, I had eaten 6 burgers, 5 large fries, and 3 milkshakes. To say the least, I was cured, and beyond. I went to bed with resolve and a smile on my face. Funny enough, I was still a bit hungry. The next morning, I told my wife that I took the liberty of cleaning out the fridge. I made up the excuse that most of the food was expired. She didn't really believe me, but she was too occupied with her mommy duties to really investigate further. I told myself that I needed to cool it and not make it so obvious, that I needed to start eating out more to keep her from knowing. It was the best plan I could think of while my stomach grumbled. That's when I remembered the contest. I was for sure now ready to enter. I was cured after all, and knowing there would be an unlimited supply of food would perhaps satiate my hunger. As I prepared to leave for the tournament, I told my wife that I had to go out of town for work, which was a bit true. After all, I am a professional. I kissed my baby girl on her forehead, bidding her goodbye, and hugged my wife tightly as I told her I loved her. And I headed out the door, all while my stomach continued to grumble and ache from its emptiness. The location of the contest was a bit underwhelming. It wasn't anything too high-end, or even a venue that would be crowded as most tournaments were. No, instead it was at some shady, what seemed to be abandoned factory. I was hesitant, but followed the instructions that were given to me. At this point, I didn't really care about my own safety. Rather, I was too enthralled with the idea of eating. I needed food. Finally, meeting with the ministers, I checked in. I spoke to dozens of people, all excited to see me, as if I were some movie star. I shook hands and received countless hugs. Smiles inundated my surroundings, and picture after picture were taken of me. I didn't care, I just wanted the contest to begin. I was introduced to the host of the tournament. He was a weird, eccentric older man. His clothes were of what seemed to be of a circus ringmaster, but they were dirty and tattered. His long, greasy hair was frizzy and unkempt. But more horrifying was his teeth. They were yellow and jagged. No, not jagged, but more like serrated. I felt very uncomfortable, but I didn't ask any questions. I just wanted to start eating.
"Are you ready for the mystery meat?"
asked the peculiar ringmaster while garnishing a hideous smile. Sure. Will we start soon?" I eagerly replied back while sweat cascaded down my face.
"Aren't you even a bit curious of what the meat is?"
the odd man once again pestered me on. I shook my head, not trying to prolong our conversation. I was sat at an elongated wooden table. Alongside of me were 4 other contestants. We all looked at each other with a bit of curiosity, and to my astonishment, most of them seemed a bit scared.
"Are you ready, contestants?"
the ringmaster announced with a bullhorn while a spotlight hovered over him. The hidden audience that remained in the shadows applauded with delight and enthusiasm. My mouth was drowning in its own drool, while my stomach grumbled in pain. I was ready to win this contest. Nothing was going to stop me. They brought the first dish, which were hot dogs. I chuckled at the ridiculous notion that this could even be considered a challenge. As we all consumed, I could hear the sneers and applause coming from the bizarre audience. Dish after dish were brought out, and slowly my combatives gave in to their satiated stomachs. We ate burgers and pizza, cake and pies. All I heard were grunts and groans as the audience roared with enchantment. Then, there were only 2 that remained, me and my rival. We sat next to each other. I turned to look at the overweight man. Grease encapsulated his face as he huffed and puffed from exhaustion. His gaze turned to me and a sense of perplexity took form. He was amazed that I looked normal.
"Let's give a round of applause for our mighty warriors. But now, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the moment we all been waiting for. It's time for the mystery meat."
The ringmaster spouted out to the crowd as they all went frantic, almost as if they were ready to start howling at the moon in excitement. I'd never seen anything like it. 2 silver trays were brought to our table, hidden underneath a cloche. Me and my competitor once again turned to each other, both of us not knowing what to expect. As the servers removed the cover, all I could hear was the audience gasp in delight. My eyes stared down at the mysterious food. But, to my dread, I could clearly see what the meat really was. It wasn't much of a mystery. It was a human arm. But to be more exact, a baby's arm.
I wonder if our champions can guess what the mystery meat is.
the grotesque announcer joked out loud while the crowd laughed and cheered. In the corner of my eye, I saw my rival begin to vomit and wave his arms in defeat. But all I could do was stare at the arm, and I was still hungry. I couldn't stop myself. I reached down to grab the small arm and I shoved it into my mouth, swallowing it almost in one bite. This, surprisingly enough, shocked the audience, and even the ringmaster. They all remained quiet for several seconds. Perhaps they didn't think I would eat it, or perhaps they were too inundated with euphoric pleasure at seeing such a ghastly sight. Regardless, I ate the mystery meat, and won. More! I shouted out. The crowd went into a frenzy. They all cheered and applauded as I ate more of the small child. But I couldn't stop myself. All I could do was hope this wasn't real, that maybe it was some elaborate hoax. After finishing, I was brought up to stage to be praised and admired for my heroic feat. I held my head down in shame. As the crowd slowly calmed, the deranged ringmaster spoke.
So, did you ever discover what the mystery meat was?
I could barely look up at the repulsive man, and with defeat in my voice, I whispered, a baby, as tears streamed down my pale face.
Oh yes, it sure was a baby. But that wasn't the mystery part,
the ugly man told me while laughing. What do you mean? I said back with a shaky tone.
The mystery? Should we tell them, folks?
He asked the audience. Yes! They shouted back.
The mystery is that it's your baby, Mr. Pulver.
Everyone in the dark and dimly lit room broke out into hysterical laughter. I began to vomit, and I felt the room spinning. I fell to one knee and I began to weep, not understanding what was happening.
It's okay, Mr. Pulver. You are our champion, and champions deserve their own crown.
The ringmaster told me, me not really paying attention. He presented me a weird-looking crown or trophy, and it finally revealed who these people were. They were the Association of Cannibals. I stared up at the audience, and as they laughed, I could finally see them through the darkness somehow. I know I should have been disgusted with what I've done, but my stomach, it began to grumble. All those people sitting there, they just looked so delicious.
Now, Mr. Pulver, it's okay. You're one of us now,
the announcer said as he put his hand on my shoulder as I remained knelt down, turned away from him. I couldn't take it anymore. The pains in my stomach were too excruciating, and I took a bite out of the ringmaster's arm. Crunch! He screamed in horror and backed away from me as the crowd choked out of pure shock. I ran to the audience. I jumped towards them like some rabid animal, and all I could remember is biting and chomping. Blood gushing everywhere. The sounds of bones crushing underneath the pressure of my teeth, devouring and consuming. The terrified scream slowly came to an end. Then there was pure silence. I looked around at all the scattered bones and I burped. I actually felt a bit full. I couldn't believe it, and I exhaled in a bit of relief. That's when I heard the whimpering. It was faint, but I followed it. Hiding behind a corner was the ringmaster, caressing his dismembered arm. No, you don't want to do this. No, he shouted. I stared at the hideous man curled up on the floor. I could feel my stomach grumble once again. And as I smiled, I told him, well, there's always room for more. Hi guys, I hope you liked the story. As mentioned in the beginning of the video, I write these stories and my goal is to write a story every week and narrate them, produce them for your enjoyment. So I would love any feedback. If it's about my stories or narration, soundtrack, just anything to give me any suggestions of how to make this a better experience. I really want to build a bigger community of storytellers and writers and listeners. So please subscribe, like the video, and leave a comment. Just let me know what you think. Alrighty guys, thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, bye.